Hello and welcome to another episode of the Power Law Investor. Today is the 28th of February 2026. A short video talking about TAO and giving you guys an update on the PAI. If you like the content, please do like and subscribe and hit the thumbs up. And do sign up for my website at thepowerlawinvestor.com for weekly and bi-weekly updates. So with that, Bitcoin's just around 65K and Bittensor's at about 175. So first of all, let's start off with the PAI value. The PAI is a metric that ranges from 0 to 1, and it is colored with dark blue being at the 0 and the 1 value giving colors that are dark red. And the way to think about the PAI is it's sort of a stretch band, right? The closer it is to 0, the more it wants to snap back to a higher value. The closer it is to 1, the more it wants to snap back to a lower value, right? A mid-range value. So it's like a rubber band. And as you can see that it does a pretty good job of calling the bottoms. And it's a causal metric, meaning that the values are only dependent on the data that comes before it, and that's how the algorithm learns. And so the value that I would have, say, on the 3rd of March 2025 is only generated and by looking at the values before that time. I'm not repainting these values based on what happens after that, right? So this is the value that you would actually have at that particular time. And what this does is allows us to see how stretched the valuation is from where it normally has been and where it's trending. And the more data we give it, the more that it learns. So for example, it does a good job of calling the bottoms, like I said. So if you look at the last recent time, around the 11th of February, we had a price of 144, and you can see that it started going dark blue right towards the bottom, right? It doesn't catch the exact bottom, but it learns more and more as time goes on. And it gives us a useful indicator for when we think it's relatively undervalued or it's relatively overvalued. And every crypto has, or every asset has kind of its home range PAI, right? And it doesn't always go around the 0.5 value, but it could be close to it. So for example, we can find that out by looking at this graph, and we can see that it spends about 50% of its time below, 60% of its time below a 0.5, right? So probably the mid-range is around here, around 0.45 or so. So at the current value of 0.42, you spend about 50% of the time below and 50% of the time above. So typically, for me, if I'm interested in buying an asset and I don't have a position in TAO right now, I would want to buy it really close to the bottom, right? Because that gives me the biggest ratio of upside. So if I'm buying it, say, at 0.1, it's only spent 5% of the time lower, but it's spent 95% of the time higher, right? So it's a 1 to 19 kind of ratio, and those are good odds, right? So that would be a good time to buy it. The difficulty with this is that the prices can continue to go downwards, and this sort of PAI system works really well if you are buying when the trend is going upwards. But right now, with the way the crypto market is and the way Bitcoin is behaving, the trend is mostly downwards, right? So you can still use the PAI from a value perspective, but you got to be nimble, right? So again, if we come to the values most recently, we'd want to be buying in this region over here, say 168 onwards, downwards. But then we want to get out whenever we get an opportunity because we know that the overall trend is likely going to go down. And so there is another strategy that we can follow that gives us the benefits of both worlds. That is, instead of trying to buy low and sell when it's sort of just moved a little bit up or a little bit higher, which is kind of a value strategy, you're buying low and selling high, you want to use what's called a momentum strategy, right? So momentum strategy is, hey, the trend is going up, I'm buying. The trend is going down, I'm selling. You're buying, I'm buying. You're selling, I'm selling, right? And that's also an effective way to do it. And that's what's indicated by these bearish and bullish crossovers over here on this chart. And basically the strategy here is that you try and follow a 0.5 PAI transition. So you go above 0.5, you buy, you go below 0.5 PAI, you sell, right? And what that does is that if the price suddenly decides to take off, like it did, say, about here, right, you're in a good position to take advantage of that full gain, or as big chunk of that gain, right, not the full gain, because you decided to buy it when it was crossing over and you took it all the way from $248 all the way to $413, right? So that gives you a great, actually it will be about here to 376, right? So all the way from around here to here, and that was a great buying opportunity because we managed to load up all the way from 248 and got out at 376. The trend was up, you got in, the trend started changing, we got out, right? And basically the small losses that we take along the way, like if you look at these most recent losses from 249 to 234, so maybe a drop of 8%, 7% or so, that's kind of the tax that we're paying for the insurance policy of having the opportunity to jump in and take advantage of those big gains, right? And that's really the way that I think is best to play it right now, because if you look at how this ad strategy has performed, if you look over the 2024 period to today, following a 0.5 PAI strategy, a crossover strategy versus buying and holding, has given you a return of 20% versus a loss of minus 36% if you were just buying and holding, right? So when you're dealing with an asset that is trending up and down and has some periods of going up followed by more extended periods of going down, the momentum strategy can be quite useful. And it's a good strategy when we just don't know, right? Right now, you may have an opinion that the trend of the market is upwards. Okay, but you might not be sure, right? We should assign a probability. And for me, I don't know. I think we're in a bear market, but I'm also willing to accept that maybe there's a 20 to 30% probability that we're just going to take off when the liquidity kicks in. And in that case, I want to have the ability to take advantage of those gains, but also protect myself from the downside. And in that case, the PAI at 0.5 is a pretty useful metric for calling that. So, but just by looking at this, you can get an idea of where we are and how stretched the valuations are in either direction at any given point. So I think it's quite powerful for that. And if you want to take a look at this in more detail, you can just go to my website, powerlawinvestor.com, and you'll find it here in the navigation bar in Bittensor PAI. Sort of a description will tell you about all these latest results, and it's just been updated. So I hope this is useful, gives you a useful perspective on how to think about pi or think about TAO from a more statistical and probability-oriented future perspective. No one knows what the future is going to hold, but we can take our best estimate by looking at what's happened in the past. And of course, we can't say for certain anything is going to happen, but we can try and cover our losses and try and take advantage of the gains. And that's why I developed this. So I hope you'll go to my website and sign up for email updates. And do like and subscribe the channel or the video if it was useful. So all the best and see you on the next one.